What's up? I'm B the Installer, and this is my wife Jen, and we're going to be talking about the QN90C from Samsung. Going to be going over some of the features and some of the differences from last year, and Jen has some questions that you guys have asked on the unboxing video that we're going to answer.
And if you want to have your questions answered, go ahead and leave a comment in this video or any of the unboxing videos that we do. Okay, you ready to get into it?
Let's do it. Okay. So we have the 85-inch version of this TV, and they do have 43-inch all the way up to 85-inch this year. But let's first start with the unboxing.
Okay, let's go. So first up, we have a question from Top Frocker or Top F Rocker from Switzerland, and said, we aren't doing the unboxings correctly. Uh-oh. What do you say about that?
Well, I noticed that comment and I responded to it because it is important. We aren't doing these videos to show you the instructional way to unbox the TV, but we probably should. We're just trying to get the TV out so that we can review it. However, he or she makes a good point that they do have some nice styrofoam on the sides that you can place under the styrofoam on the ends of the TV to make it easier and less tippy. We do mention that the TV was kind of, not very stable. And that's the way that they do that to stabilize the TV. So good point by Top Frucker.
Okay, so since we're talking about the unboxing, did you notice any external differences? We noticed there wasn't any One Connect box on this one.
Yes, no One Connect box on any of the 4K models except for the QD-OLED, the S95C. And then the 8K QLED, which is the QN90C. Sorry, a lot of different model numbers. All the other TVs are not going to have One Connect boxes, so that's in line with this TV's previous year's model. Not a big deal there.
Okay, while you mentioned that, Timothy Isaac asked if the QN95C is coming to the US. Is it?
I believe so, and that is not going to have a One Connect box. So that's the difference, because last year that was kind of like the flagship of the QLEDs for 4K, and it had a One Connect box, and it was like worldwide. But this year it will not have a One Connect box. So it's supposed to be a better TV than this one, with twice the dimming zones and having the speakers on the back like the 8K version does, but no One Connect box. So the point of all this is that there's a lot of different models and a lot of confusion. But to answer your previous question about the differences between this TV and the year before, the first one's kind of small, which is just that the remote is a little bit smaller than last year. And while I love the solar cell remote, it's getting too small now. And it's starting to feel kind of like a cheap little remote that we lose in the couch. And I kind of liked the first version that was feeling a little bit more metally or a little bigger, but I'm sure it's more efficient. So that was one little thing. And then the second thing I noticed is that the reflections in the TV are way different, and it kind of leads down this rabbit hole of differences in general from this TV to its previous version. So this does not have strong anti-reflective properties, which is good and bad. It's bad because the reflections are worse, but when the light shines in the screen, the QN90C doesn't push that rainbow across the entire screen. The good news is, with bright content, this TV is bright enough to knock down reflections. But if you're watching something dark in the room, it may be harder to see without that better reflection handling. And this also has other effects on the picture quality as well.
Okay, well, since we're talking about other effects, what are they?
Well, this QN90C seems to have more in common with the QN85B of last year, which was like the step down model, than it does with the QN90B, which was the higher model. So it's a little confusing. I know there's a lot of numbers and letters and all that in there. But the point is that it has a different anti-reflective coating, but it also has better uniformity, which is a good thing. But both of those things were because it had a different panel in general. It was an ADS type panel versus a VA panel. And without getting too crazy, some people like the VA panel because it has better contrast. Some people like the ADS or IPS type panel for gaming because it has better wide angle viewing and better colors. But I think for TVs in general, the VA panel is preferred. And I'm wondering if this is Samsung's attempt to be more competitive with pricing, or if they think that, in general, the people of the US at least aren't going to notice these differences. So hey, if this TV, the QN90C, is going to be the one that's mainstream at Costco and Best Buy, even though there might be a better version in the QN95C, I think that they're just trying to save money, or they're trying to make it easier for them to get it, thousands and thousands of them in stores.
Well, that sounds like a lot of changes. At the end of the day, does this TV look better, worse, the same?
Tough to answer, because we spent a lot of time trying to dial in settings, and it was very difficult for me to get this to where I liked it, where I thought it looked similar to last year's TV. Last year we had the 85-inch. We really liked it right off the bat. And then Later on during the year, other people with smaller sizes had some issues with it, with the blooming, some here, some there. So it's very difficult to tell where that TV ended up at the end of the year. That was a V8 panel. We enjoyed it. Now this year, I've spent a lot of time with the settings, trying to tweak it to get it to where we thought it looked like last year. And we've just had some difficulties. And I think all the different changes, it being an ADS panel, it not being the VA, it's just difficult to say whether or not I like it better or worse than last year's TV. So I was liking it for regular cable and on the operating system, but when we got to HDR and I put the TV in filmmaker mode with the tone mapping on static mode, which is a change in 2023, before Samsung would just default to active tone mapping, but in static tone mapping, which is supposed to be more accurate, I found the HDR to be less exciting than last year. I could hardly see what was going on in darker scenes, and with the less than anti-reflective capabilities, I just didn't really enjoy it that much. In fact, for me to get the HDR back to where I felt the QN90B was last year, I had to engage the active tone mapping and utilize the contrast enhancement. With those two things engaged, I felt like the TV was bright enough to wow you like I felt in 2022. So yeah, so the static versus active tone mapping, a little bit confusing. Now the average user will have to go in there and add it to get that Samsung pop. And I just feel like they added a lot of features, but most of them make it worse than last year's TV, and now you have to add more to make it look as good.
Very interesting. Now, since you said HDR, let's talk about Dolby Vision. Beth Folk asked, is it a big deal that Samsung doesn't have Dolby Vision?
Well, I think yes and no to a degree. I think yes, that most people would like to have Dolby Vision on Samsung TVs because it is an industry standard now. It's kind of like, that's what people think HDR is. Dolby Vision is HDR. So yes, I think they should conform and it could just be an industry standard. But on all the other TVs that I've seen from Samsung, I felt like the HDR looked fantastic without Dolby Vision. So this having the active and static, I think in static, HDR tone mapping, I don't think it's very impressive. Maybe it's more accurate, but with it active, I think it looks awesome. And I don't think that this is a reason not to buy a Samsung TV. I think there's other reasons you could or could not buy a Samsung TV for, and we're going to keep talking about those. But Dolby Vision isn't a deal breaker for me, though it is for some other people.
Okay, well, while you're talking about reasons to buy or not buy a TV, did you do any testing on this TV?
Yes,
Share,
we
please.
did. Probably the number one concern when it comes to LED or QLED TVs is the blooming and how the TV can handle the light control. And I'm not sure that the blooming is worse or better on this TV, because I said before, we got it early and we liked it, and then they might have had some firmware updates that made it not as good. I'm not sure. But this TV didn't strike me as fantastic with regard to blooming. There is blooming, and what's worse is it shows up in real world content. We're watching some of the Star Wars flicks, and in scenes where it's just stars and it's moving quickly, it was hard to see the stars when compared against other TVs that we have. And when watching scenes where there's a lot of bright areas and dark areas next to each other, it lost contrast, or it lacked contrast in some of those scenes. And both of those can be attributed to the change in panel, because this TV technically has worse contrast than the previous VA panel, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the blooming's worse. It's very different. And so kind of a hodgepodge mixed results issue again, where I'm not 100% certain that it's going to be better or worse than last year, but I'm not finding it awesome. And that's kind of how I felt like last year. I felt like a lot of the highlights were fantastic. There wasn't that much blooming. Other people felt a little differently and feel a little differently about this TV. But I think it's just a different TV, and that's what we're going to have to get used to. But on the positive side with this new ADS type panel is it's got better uniformity. So we have less of the dirty screen effect when watching these tests. You don't see as much blotchiness on the screen, which is fantastic for when you're watching bright sports. We've spent a lot of time watching the World Cup, and when you watch that and the green going back and forth on the pitch, it definitely is noticeable. So less noticeable on this TV, and that's a great thing, especially sports, games, all that kind of stuff. And as I said before, the anti-reflective coating is different. It doesn't knock down the reflection quite as well as the older model does, but it doesn't have that wide angle viewing layer, which sometimes is what partly causes that uniformity issue. So again, that's kind of up and down as well.
Good to hear about some of your testing results. We haven't talked about the operating system and the processing. Are there any improvements there?
Yes, I think in both. I think the processing in general of the TV and the upscaling looks good. And I think that the operating system moves quicker. So, last year we had some issues where when you're just making simple movements left and right, there was always the delay and it just took forever to get through the operating system. But, this year it's very quick. I like that. You can get into all the different menus rather quickly.
So speaking of the operating system, Creighton Coleman asked, why even have cable or satellite with these new TVs?
Well, that is a good point because the Samsung TV Plus is a fantastic benefit of the Samsung TV. So, of course, you have fantastic apps throughout most operating systems, and the fact that it's faster than last year makes it useful, and so you don't need a third-party device necessarily. So yes, I think that the operating system is fantastic, much faster than last year, and it has a Samsung TV Plus channels. So, you guys don't even really watch cable. I watch cable on YouTube TV. I'm the only one. I watch a lot of live sports and TV shows and whatnot. But you can pretty much get anything you want on these different apps. And then having the Samsung Plus channels is just a benefit. I always remark that that's how I got into the Kitchen Nightmare show.
Baywatch.
Yeah, there's so many good shows on there. So yes, they make a good point. You can get plenty of good content on these different apps.
So we haven't talked about gaming yet. I've got a question from Carl CZ. He asked if it was a good TV for gaming or if you should go with the OLED. And before you answer, I will say he does have the Samsung suite of products, the phone, the buds, the tablet.
Yeah, well, okay, so we'll answer that part second. But first, yes, it's a good gaming TV. The QLEDs are known for fantastic gaming, great HDR for gaming. They have 4 HDMIs with 4K 120, so you can game on any of the ports. eARC for good sound quality, all these different things, right? VRR, game bar, all these things. So fantastic. But OLED TVs are also fantastic for gaming. And there are plenty of other OLED TVs like, the LG C3, G3, all of them that are coming out that I'm excited to see and are probably fantastic. But if they're in the Samsung ecosystem and they want to stay there, I might actually recommend the QD OLED, the S95C, if it's 77 inch or smaller will do for them. If they want to go 85 inch or bigger, then it's like this or, different TVs like maybe the 83 inch of those OLED TVs I was talking about. So the answer is yes, fantastic gaming TV, but yes, I also like OLED TVs and you have a variety to choose from.
So overall, B, is this a good TV? Would you recommend it? And Melman commented, I would wait for this year's Hisense releases. What do you think about this TV and where it stands for 2023?
That is a good question. I appreciate that question. So I feel like this TV has left the door open for other companies like Hisense, like TCL, because I don't think this is the top tier QLED that they normally put out. So yes, there is the QN95C coming. It probably won't be as readily available as this one. It won't be in Costco, for example. I think that this TV will be the mainstream one. So it's not a huge improvement over last year's TV. So that kind of leaves room for TVs like the Hisense U8K, which is a mini LED, and the TCL QM8. So both of those TVs are mini LED, and I would probably bet that they both are going to offer better value and either similar features to this Samsung, or they might even be better this year. I just think that Samsung isn't upping their game at the same speed as the other two companies. So I think they're just catching up, and it's going to be a wild year with a lot of good TVs to check out. I definitely would not recommend it at $5,000 for an 85-inch version, especially when you can get the QN90B from last year for half the price. And that's significantly different. Very difficult to recommend that. Down the road, this TV will then probably be half the price again. So if you're talking about Black Friday or even an Amazon Prime Day, it'll be less expensive, and then it's, that's debatable whether or not I even think that this is better than last year's model. I think it's about the same, but so much different that it's just a brand new TV in general. And I think that Samsung will sell a lot of these TVs. So I would probably look for that QN90B as long as it's available for the rest of the year. And I would look at some of those other TVs we talked about. We'll have reviews on all those, etc.
Well, B, is there any way we can help people with their buying decisions moving forward?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked. What you can do is go to BeTheInstaller.com and take our TV quiz, where we ask you 5 quick questions in order to find the best TV for you based off of your room conditions and what kind of content you might watch. You'll get a primary option and a few more if you scroll down. And if you click on the links and decide to buy a TV, it helps support the channel at no extra cost to you.
Sounds like a great resource, Brandon. Thanks for setting that up.
You got it. And thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to comment below if you have any other questions that you might have. And also watch this video on the QN90C unboxing, the 85-inch. And down below here is the S95C QD OLED. Both cool videos. We'll catch you on the next one.